Hey everyone, so when you hear the word samurai, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably a warrior with a sword, right? Well, what if I told you that for over 250 years, Japan's samurai were warriors who had no war to fight? Today, we're going to dig into how they pretty much swapped their swords for things like paintbrushes and became the builders of modern Japan.
So that brings us to the big question, doesn't it? What happens to a whole class of professional fighters when all the fighting just stops? I mean, it's really a question of survival. They had to find a whole new purpose, or they would have just faded away. And their solution? Well, it didn't just save them. It completely reshaped their entire country.
To really get how they pulled this off, we have to rewind the clock a bit and understand just how much Japan was changing at the time.
Okay, so try to picture this. For hundreds of years, Japan was just in a state of almost nonstop civil war, warlords fighting warlords. Then, in 1603, everything changes. A new government called the Tokugawa shogunate takes over, unifies the country, and brings about something almost unimaginable: over 250 years of peace. The fighting was finally over.
Now, this is where things get a little strange. The new government set up this super strict social pyramid, ranking everyone from most important to least. And guess who they put right at the very top? The samurai. Think about that for a second. Their main job, fighting, was now gone. But instead of losing power, they were officially named the most important class in all of Japan.
So you can see the problem here, right? If you're at the top of the food chain, but the one skill you're famous for isn't needed anymore, what do? The samurai had to come up with a whole new job description for themselves, and they had to do it fast. And they totally pulled it off. They transformed themselves by taking on 3 big new roles. They became government administrators, they became teachers, and they became cultural leaders. Let's break down what each of those actually looked like.
First up, administrators. You can think of them like modern-day city managers or government officials. They took all that discipline they learned as warriors and used it to run towns, manage tax collection, and make sure the laws were followed. They were the ones keeping society running smoothly. Next, they became teachers. Lots of samurai actually opened their own schools. And we're not just talking about swordsmanship. They taught reading, writing, ethics, and even art like calligraphy. This was a huge deal because they helped make more people literate and spread knowledge all across Japan, which laid the foundation for the modern school system we see today. And finally, they became the leaders of culture, the trendsetters of their day. Samurai practiced and perfected arts like the famous tea ceremony, painting, and writing short poems called haiku. They also became huge supporters of theater, like the amazing kabuki shows. They proved they were so much more than just fighters. They were true artists.
So how did an entire class of warriors make such a massive change? Well, the secret sauce really was this powerful philosophy they all lived by, a special code of conduct that was at the absolute heart of what it meant to be a samurai.
And that philosophy was called Bushido. It literally translates to the way of the warrior. You can think of Bushido as their moral code, the set of rules that every single samurai lived by. It was like their internal compass, guiding everything they did, even when there were no battles to fight. The core values of Bushido were things like loyalty, an absolutely unbreakable promise to their lord and their family. Honor, which meant protecting your reputation, was everything. And discipline, having complete self-control over your actions and thoughts. These weren't just battlefield rules. These were rules for life, whether you were running a town, teaching kids, or painting a masterpiece. Now, even during all this peace, the samurai never went anywhere without their famous swords. And believe it or not, what happened to those swords is the perfect symbol for the incredible change the samurai themselves went through. Every samurai carried 2 swords, the long katana and the shorter wakizashi. Before, these were tools of war, plain and simple. But during this long period of peace, they became powerful symbols. They were almost never actually drawn to fight. Instead, just wearing the swords was a statement. It said, "I belong to the ruling class. I have authority and heritage." So what was the end result of all this change? Well, the samurai didn't just survive. You could say they became the architects of modern Japan. And here's what's truly mind-blowing. The samurai only made up about 7% of the entire population. That's a tiny fraction, less than 1 out of every 10 people. And yet, this small group had this massive, massive influence, setting the standards and shaping the culture for the entire nation. Now, before we get to their final legacy, you might be asking, how did they get paid? Good question. Since there was no war, their lords gave them something called stipends, which is basically just a salary, paid in either rice or money. This financial support is what gave them the freedom to focus on being administrators and artists. So, what did this all add up to in the long run? A lasting legacy that you can still see in Japan today. The values of Bushido, like honor and discipline, they became a huge part of Japan's national identity. The schools they started, they created the foundation for Japan's modern education system, and their passion for the arts made sure that Japanese culture was not only preserved, but also celebrated for generations to come. In the end, the samurai proved that a warrior's greatest strength isn't just winning a battle, but building a lasting peace. And that kind of leaves us with a big question to think about. The samurai had to completely redefine their purpose. So in our world today, how do we define what a hero is? What does it really mean to serve society?